How about her? You know, what could be going through her mind? But all through it all, she was calm. Of course, many were communicating through emails, but I could read between the lines that she was very calm. She wasn't panicking. I would say it was emotional, intelligence at display. 'Cause that's what we are here. So in hindsight, I realized, oh, actually, we've got the right person for this book discussion. So thank you so much for your patience, your humility throughout the entire process. I think it's really a demonstration of your commitment and passion towards such engagements and such projects. So thank you so much. Yeah, without further ado, please join me in welcoming our CEO, Mr. Kadari Singo, for the opening remarks. Karibu sana CEO.
Good afternoon. I have trouble labeling 4 o'clock as afternoon or evening. So I should say maybe good evening. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 19th edition of the book review series. So for some of you who have missed, this is our 19th. So if this is your first, you're sure that you have missed a lot. First, I would like to recognize the presence of Miranda Naiman, founder and managing direct partner of Empower. Thank you so much for graciously accepting to be our reviewer today. I think a better version of you will be given by our moderator. According to Harvard Business Review, the competencies of self-management, self-awareness, social awareness, and relationship management that make up emotional intelligence are the most sought after interpersonal skills in a workplace today. Optimal by Daniel Goleman and Cary Cherniss delves into the science of high performance and emotional intelligence, providing actionable insights for individuals and organizations seeking to achieve peak effectiveness and well-being. The authors suggest emotional intelligence is characterized by self-understanding, the ability to keep disturbing emotions from disrupting. I repeat that, the ability to keep disturbing emotions from disrupting one's activity and empathy, which helps individuals support coworkers and be good team players. The link between emotions and productivity is becoming increasingly noticeable. Leaders with high emotional intelligence are considered able to draw out the best possible team performance, make decisions effectively, and solve organizational challenges. As a result, emotional intelligence has been incorporated in all Uongozi Institute's executive programs. Therefore, this particular book discussion is a great opportunity to continue the learning and discussion around emotional intelligence. I thank you for being with us today, for being attentive members, and I thank those who especially have reviewed the book also. I believe you will have a better contribution to this discussion. Looking at the numbers here, if you were in this kind of discussion 20 years ago, you would have probably found only men in this room. Today, I see we have about 23 female participants and only 20 male participants. Personally, I'm an advocate of women empowerment because I have 3 girls. So when I see women in these programs, I take it personal. So I really encourage you to continue to show this spirit of coming to our discussions, especially the women. And I'm not saying men should not come, but we have to make sure that women are also a part of this. So saying this, Miranda, welcome to this is our first discussion, but as a reviewer, I believe you'll become a member now from now on, not just a reviewer. So we've recruited another member right here. And Namwaka, thank you for being with us. She has been working with us for many years. Namwaka used to be our Uongozi Institute employee. And then she left for other green pasture opportunities out there. But welcome you, Namwaka. We are very happy to be with you. George, thank you for organizing this. And thank you, the Research and Policy Department, represented by Emmanuel Alfred back there. That's a department which oversees these activities of the library. After seeing this, I take this back to you, Namwaka. Thank you very much.
And again, welcome back to many of you. I see some very familiar faces. And I just realized that we haven't seen each other since last year. So Happy New Year. I know it's March, but still, Happy New Year. I hope everybody is well. Karibuni tena. And yes, I'm very excited to have you, Miranda. And again, thank you for your patience. And so before we get started, allow me to read Miranda's bio, as Mr. Singo had started to say who she is. But I think, and allow me, and I'll read it verbatim, so just so that I don't add my own salt. I think this is when you hear, for those of you who don't know the width and breadth of all that Miranda is, you understand why we were also really looking forward to having her as a reviewer in the session. So Miranda is an unstoppable force for good and the visionary founder of Empower. I think most of you here have heard of Empower, which is a Tanzanian firm championing transformational consulting tailored to Africa's potential. As a strategy implementation partner for executive committees and boards, Empower translates organizational visions into actionable, measurable outcomes, driving sustainable growth and impactful change across the continent. Miranda's leadership is rooted in a growth mindset, and I think this is really important, and it's something that has been discussed and touched on in the book. Equipping individuals and organizations with tools and strategies to unlock potential and foster innovation. Through Empower, she drives initiatives like Generation Empower, Gen M, preparing Tanzanian youth with 21st century skills through partnerships with leading universities. And I think most of you here, some of you are youth. You'll be very keen to know more about this. But beyond Empower, Miranda brings extensive governance expertise across financial, healthcare, and entrepreneur sectors. As a board of directors of CRDB Bank, vice chair of CCBRT Hospital, and chair of AWEC, she fosters strategic growth and social impact. She also serves on the Global AI Council and is a leader in entrepreneurs organizations, championing entrepreneurial communities and global innovation. So that is really, again, snapshot of who we have in front of us and why we were also really keen and patient in ensuring that we have Miranda join us here today. So again.
Thank you.
So Miranda, let us start the conversation by asking you to give us a really big picture review and overview of the book Optimal, which is entitled Optimal, How to Sustain Personal and Organizational Excellence Every Day. What are your thoughts? Firstly, what does it tell us? What does it say? And what are your reflections on reading this book?
Thank you, Namwaka, and thank you for that lovely introduction and welcoming remarks from the CEO. Before I share my views, I just want to thank you profoundly for inviting me because it was very unexpected. So I really, really appreciate these strategic conversations that are happening to build people, to share ideas. So I'm really excited to be here. So that's number one. But I have a confession that I must make. I know that I'm probably a fish out of water in this room, Namwaka, because I'm not an avid reader. That's my confession. But I'm a very voracious listener. I do a lot of audiobooks and podcasts. This does not mean that I don't read. I know some people are looking at me with disgust right now, like, what is she doing in the library? I have books, I read, but I wish I was reading more. So I commend you for the commitment that you have to that. And I will join, CEO, I will join. And maybe just one acknowledgement to George as well. I think from your opening remarks that you made there, it also shows your empathy as well, because probably I frustrated you in the process. So I might have come across calm, but a lot of the changes of dates were from me. So thank you very much for remembering me since we met in the old library. Asante sana. So to the book. You forced me to read this book. So thank you for that as well. George sent the copy to my office to make sure, I'm going to make sure I read this book. I was pleasantly surprised because I think a lot of the way I've chosen to live my life and lead my team at work was very aligned to the principles that were in this optimal book. And I think I was also relieved that sometimes we hold ourselves to a very high standard, the concept of flow, that we should be like these elite athletes and we should be the best of the best, but we can't always be like that. That's the reality. So when I read it, it was like, relief. We don't have to be that. We can be optimal, which is a more sustained level of excellence, something that we can all aspire to and we can control, as the CEO shared, that we can start to eliminate distractions and be more intentional with where we put our energy. And I think that concept of neural harmony came through very strongly throughout the book, looking at you personally, but also how this shows up in the workplace and how we can all be better leaders that are driven by emotional intelligence. In particular, for emotional intelligence, I believe that it's actually more important than IQ, and I think the author also mentioned that as well. We can all have smarts, technical smarts, we can learn that. Learning EQ is a lot more nuanced and more difficult. Doesn't mean it's impossible, we can all adapt. But I think the reflections were focusing on empathy, and particularly for my team, one of our 3 values in Empower is connection and oneness. It affirmed me again that if one of our 3 values is very much focused on the EQ, we're on the right track. So I finished the book thinking, okay, maybe we're getting something right. And yeah, reaffirmed and relieved that flow is not something I should be aspiring to, because I used to work in that way, going really hard, hustling hard, and then burning out. Right. Crash and burn, and then start again, and then crash and burn. Right. But now it's more of a sustained plateau of performance. And I think it's achievable, it's feasible. And that's what I loved about this book. Yeah.
Thank you. And Miranda, you've already started to point the difference between flow.
Yes.
Vis-a-vis optimal. So maybe if you can dive a little bit deeper in firstly explaining to everybody. I'm assuming all of you have read the book, but just to give us again, big picture. What's the difference between flow and optimal? And then in your own experience, you said that of course it has already touched on some of your core values. Yes. In Empower. But how have you used optimal, right, in the work that you do? And has this also given you a shift in your thinking from the flow yes. model that I think for most of us, we feel like if we're not in that flow state of mind, then somehow we're a failure or we're not achieving. Yes. Or we're not even moving forward. Not enough. So is optimal or has optimal also shaped or changed the way in which you think and the way in which you lead? So just to distinguish between the two, as you'd asked me before, so flow being a temporary peak state, so happens in short bouts. Think of a sprinter, an athlete, or somebody that has to sustain for the 2 hours of a marathon and they really have to get themselves in top condition. Whereas optimal, as we said before, is a more sustained period of excellence and productivity. And as you rightly said, Namwaka, it's achievable, whereas flow, not all people can reach flow. Not all of us get there fully. And then it can make you feel insecure and self-deprecating and have doubt. Are you good enough? Are you enough? Whereas optimal is achievable for all of us. So that was the first thing I just wanted to distinguish. I think shifting from flow to optimal in myself, and then I'll talk about business a little bit, has come with age. It's come with age. I see you smiling, yes. So you must relate to that. Yes. As we mature, like fine wine, I might say, Namwaka, allow us, it's our month. We start to get more confident and more comfortable, being uncomfortable, being vulnerable, and stepping into those gray areas. And I think when you're a bit younger, you have more pressure to be everything to everyone at all times. And if you're not, then you're a failure and you're letting people down. And we still, don't get me wrong, I still have those thoughts. My son's at home in bed, he's got the flu, and he was like, Mom, can you stay with me? I was like, no, I'm doing this book review today. So yeah, that guilt factor is also there as well. But it's about being very intentional, about making sure that
I want to live a life with the right principles and also the right support system that I'm able to sustain that productivity. So for me, it touches all areas. It touches the people we associate with, so be that your team, your friendship circle, your community. This is a community of sorts that you're part of. It touches the way you take care of your vessel, your body, what you put in your mouth, what you put in your mind, what you decide to read. All of those are factors that I think contribute to being in optimal state. And they are choices. When we're on Instagram, do we choose to look at celebrities, or are we ingesting healthy content that can help us be better and more productive? And in the workplace, I think it is about creating a conducive environment that everyone that works in a certain place can reach their optimal state. And the objective of that is twofold. One, for the individual to unleash their full potential, but two, for the company to perform better. So it makes sense to create that environment for your staff. Some things that we try to do is to have, I shared our value of connection and oneness. First of all, we hire for that value along with two others. We measure performance against that value. We reward people against values as well. So it really helps to people to live and breathe that value of connection and oneness, which I think relates to growth mindset, empathy, and all the connections that we have with individuals. Balance, work-life balance as well. So we just instituted only 6 months ago a Friday off policy. It's on a rotation. So everybody gets an extra Friday off in addition to the statutory leave that you're required to have. Yeah, that very, very, I think CEO is listening, so keep clapping, George. They might be inspired today. I have a very big Gen Z workforce, Gen Z millennial. I'm in the millennial group, but I have a lot of Gen Zs. I love them. They challenge me. But this is the kind of thing that you need to do to get them in optimal state. They want more balance. I feel we were less picky as millennials. We're willing to just keep going. But Gen Zs, they'll call you out when things are not quite right. We socialize together, so to try and get people to really connect and feel psychologically safe, so they're in an environment where they're not competing. They're actually working towards a common goal. We eat lunch together. We do games nights once a month. All these things are things that we've put into the company as part of the culture to drive optimal state in every individual working there and collectively, so that we can be better and can grow the company. And health and well-being, I think, is also a focus. So making sure people can access counseling when they need, environment of no judgment. Anything is acceptable as long as it's communicated respectfully. And I think that kind of culture has helped to bring out optimal state, along with all the other business things. The systems and processes and SOPs are also important. But this human side, I think, is critical. Yeah.
I think, Miranda, you really touching on the human side, and I think that's also came out really clearly throughout the book, that it really starts with that focus on the self first, and then how this then translates to the organizational level. I think this links quite well to the next question. As Mr. Singo, CEO Ngozi, you pointed out that this book really is really firmly and deeply embedded within the whole conversation and debate around emotional intelligence.
Right.
And this link between optimal, the state of being optimal, and emotional intelligence is made very clearly and really emphasized strongly throughout. And the linking also between workers' engagement, which is, Miranda, you already started to give us some examples to how to make sure that, how you're linking this with workers' engagement, job satisfaction. You said, like, for us in the millennials, I think we were more, we fit into the structure easier, I think, when we started out. But then as we got older, as you said, we started to question slightly. And commitment. So based on your experience, this linkage that you see between optimal and EI, and you have years of experience and you've grown in power from when I remember hearing it about it and seeing it grow. And we've seen it grow from 2 to 3 people, I think, to now how many staff do you have?
40 now.
40, yes. So how has this linkage between optimal and and emotional intelligence, how has it manifested in you as a leader?
I think it's a great question. I think there are two parts. There's what is naturally part of me, and then what I think I've tried to hone and learn as I've gone through life and learned through experiences, some tough experiences and some smoother ones as well. I think you touched on growth mindset earlier, and that is a natural, I would say, innate trait that I have since I was a child. Very curious, always wanting to understand, connect with people. Of course, when you're a child and you're like that, you're seen as very annoying. But it helps you to really make sense of the world. Of course, there are risks. You can be misunderstood as well. You can come across nosy maybe, but it's just curiosity. And I think that connection with people and wanting to really understand what is their reality, what is their perspective, what are their feelings, and also challenging what you can see on the surface. I remember from a young age having that ability to kind of read between the lines. If I say, "How are you, Namwaka?" and you say, "I'm fine, Miranda," I can see she's not fine, but have that courage to go, actually, maybe you're not, and to engage and go into that space that we don't always like to go. So I have a natural tendency for that. Now, as a leader, I make an intentional choice to try to reach into the soul of each person that I'm working with. It doesn't mean each person is my friend, but it does mean that I care, and I really want to understand what makes you tick. What might you be going through in your life? I can't solve all your problems, but to understand helps me to lead you and to support you where I can. And to make each person comfortable enough to open up and tell me whatever they need to tell me. Life can be very messy, and it's not that I'm trying to attract everyone's problems and boss mina shida hela or whatever. No, that's not what I'm looking for, but I am looking for you to feel safe and know that whatever issue there is, we can figure it out. We can find a way. So that's very intentional. Ways that I do that, I try to, particularly with my management team, spending time one-on-one, at least once a month. I do random WhatsApp messages to everyone from the intern through to my senior manager, just checking in. Nobody else will know we're talking. And I connect with each person on different things. There's somebody that we talk about Love is Blind on Netflix because we both like trash TV. There's somebody else we're connecting because she's fallen in love for the second time, and the first time it was not good. And we're sharing stories and tips. It's all private. No one knows. I'm talking to somebody else who's been estranged from their parents, and how can they reconnect with their father? So it's about having moments of connection, I think, with each individual. And that is really helpful because the person can trust you, knows they're safe with you, and then brings their full self to work and gives their all. So rather than, beating someone with the stick to get the maximum, connect with someone that they feel so safe, so purposeful, that in Empower, they can give their all. And honestly, our growth is from the people. It's not me, it's the people. So it helps. It's an intentional choice, I think, as a leader.
Right. And then maybe this is a bit off script, but how then do you then translate that into, for example, your senior management?
Right.
Because I mean, you can't do it all yourself.
Yeah.
So what you've just described is exceptional.
Yeah.
But you also need others around you to also have that same culture and understanding for them to be able to work with you. How then do you pass it on or pass it forward to your
Great question. Let me put down my notes. We're going off script.
Yes, we're going off script.
Once a quarter, we do an extended management team offsite day. We spend 2 days actually offsite out of the office, where we focus on day one is strategy, work related. Day two is more about connection and solving problems. We do hackathons. We have 3 partners. We bring the business's biggest problems to the table and have the management team debate how we should solve it. Now, I will give an example of one that we did recently, using De Bono's 6 thinking hats. I don't know if you've read any of De Bono's books, but he talks about, as a human being, when we make decisions, to have 6 different thinking hats, from the kind of logical to the emotional. It's a great book. Check it out. It's very short, but helpful to make my managers think 360 about things. and try to avoid subconscious bias. So the way that I've taught them to be more empathetic and more aware is to give them scenarios. So I'll draft scenarios that they don't know are based on real things I'm dealing with staff members, remove the names, write scenarios, and then we'll debate what to do. So an employee has been coming to work late every day, this many days. They've sat down with their manager and they've shared that they have a sick mother at home, but their performance, we'll explain the whole situation confidentially and then say to the managers, you're the partner of the firm. What do you do with this? And what it helps them to do, particularly with the 6 thinking hats, is to debate and decide and also see how difficult leadership can be in making the right decision, because you can err too much on the emotional side or you can be too logical. They've been away 4 days, so we should give a warning letter and this person's mother's in hospital. How do we, but at the same time, the business needs to move. How do we creatively solve these problems? So I do those on a quarterly basis. They usually do 6 scenarios every quarter. Helps them to hone the skill. And then I would say on-the-spot feedback. When I see one of my management team dealing with a scenario and I think it's lacking the human element, I will pull them aside and ask them to reflect and say, I noticed this happened and you decided to do this. Why did you make that decision? Did you consider this? No, I didn't, Miranda. Did you think about that? Next time, make sure you consider all these others because you could have blind spots. Yeah, so I try to push that. Yeah,
Absolutely. And yes, focusing on the human side, the empathy, the connection, key. And I think as Mr. Singo said in the introduction, this is now taking priority.
Yeah.
Even when you go up, I think they call it the C-suite.
Yes.
The CEO,
Yes.
CFO,
Yes.
CCO, like all the people that the chiefs.
Yeah.
They're now looking for people with those skill sets,
Yeah.
which traditionally were maybe considered soft,
Mhm.
right? But then how then are you also then working to balance that, like understanding the human element, because you do the same thing, but still to deliver.
Yeah.
Because you still have your KPIs
Yes.
as Empower,
Yeah.
or even as Miranda,
Yeah.
At your own,
Yeah.
as a leader, what you'd like to see. How then do you make sure that you're keeping track of this, the performance, the flow
Performance
part,
side of the
which
business.
is almost
Yes.
the flow part,
Yes.
like when you have your
Yeah,
big
yeah, yeah.
win, when you
Yeah.
get your big,
Yeah.
your client, maybe a client
Yeah.
that you've been seeking and seeking out for a few years, and then finally you get them. That's like
Yeah.
a flow moment, right? So then how do you ensure that there's this balance happening?
balance.
Or is there a balance?
There is a balance. There
Okay.
must be.
Okay.
Absolutely. I was smiling because I don't like the word soft skills
Yeah.
because they're actually power skills. They are the real power skills. As you rightly said, leaders that are really making progress and impact are embracing these as power skills. They're not seen as an optional set of soft skills on the side that I'm great technically, and if I have time, I'll learn these. They are at the forefront. And I think as we're moving towards a world where generalists are probably more valued than specialists, that's a big shift in the world of work. Generalists are more valued than specialists. They want you to be a leader that is good with numbers, good with people, good with stakeholders, able to speak in public, good at details, but able to zoom out and see the big picture. You need to be a bit of everything. And so I think these skills, these power skills, soft skills as they're called in the book, and emotional intelligence is going to get you there. How do you balance it now with the KPIs and the performance? I'll use Empower as an example. As I said, it's one of 3 values. We've got one that's devoted to results. That is very, bottom line. Where are we heading? Have we delivered in full, on time, on target, to budget, So we have that in place. And then we have service excellence, which is about understanding the customer, which also has an EQ element. Because if you don't understand your customer's needs, you can never deliver a solution. So probably, yeah, we're about skewed 60 on the EQ side, but we've got that devoted to results part. We track very carefully with our company scorecard. I mentioned that we use our values in performance management, but KPIs are also there as well. So we try to get people to balance. And I can share how important the connection and oneness part is. I can give you an example of a staff member that has worked with us who was technically sound, delivering on time, doing a good job, but had very poor people skills. And we made a decision, a difficult decision, not to renew their contract when it came to an end. Sounds harsh, but why? They were disrupting the whole culture of the organization. So for us, and I think for many others, and as we've seen in the book, those power skills, those soft skills are really critical. And if you're lacking them, it's crucial that you build that muscle. You could lose an opportunity as a result of not having them. And I will caveat that with, we coached the person. It's not that we woke up one day and said, you will not be here, but the person didn't fit anymore because they did not value the human element and the connection and the empathy. In fact, they did not have empathy. They were good at their job, but they were mistreating people in the office. And that kind of thing is not acceptable in the workplace. And if you're a leader and you're in the limelight and you're responsible for the whole organization, certainly not. You're not able to get away with it anymore. Times have changed.
The times have changed, and there is such a big shift.
Yeah.
And this shift, I mean, you gave the example from being a generalist to being a specialist. And that, I think most of us are starting to see it, even the youth or even a little bit older, where I think traditionally, you're asked, what are you? And you have to make, I think those are the big five, which was you're a doctor, you're a lawyer, you're an engineer, you're an accountant, and maybe something else in between. But now you have people, I think myself included, when you ask me, who are you? I'm like, well, that's the story. You know, I'm a bit, as Singo said, you know, I was at Uongozi, I'm a technical person, but thanks to CEO Singo and the others saw other things in me, and then you know, told me that no, you're actually a generalist.
Yes.
And that was the first time I actually heard that that you can be a generalist. You can be not a jack of all trades, but just you know enough about a lot of different things, and that's also okay.
Yes.
I think the pressure on some of the youth now to have to fit into a box should be lifted. And I think you working with the youth and this book is showing us that. So you mentioned again the importance of emotional intelligence, and there's a lot that has been written and said about emotional intelligence. So many books out now, right?
Of course.
But the basic template for emotional intelligence, acceptable to all schools of thoughts, sees four main domains. So if you can draw a box, and you have the four boxes here. One box is self-awareness, another box is self-management, one is social awareness, and then the other one is social interaction.
Yeah.
How has this shaped your work and leadership?
Okay. The four kind of facets of emotional intelligence, and I would encourage you all to do an online quiz, if you will. In fact, the book didn't recommend doing that because you could be biased when filling it. But if you hold yourself to account and are really honest, and I'm happy to share, if it can be shared with all members of the library, will help you to see where you score on those four different facets. It's very helpful. How has it helped me? I'll start with the self, which is the self-awareness, and then self-management first. Namwaka, I have a face like a cartoon. So I have had to learn how to control my facial expression, because when you're sitting in a boardroom or you're sitting in a high-level negotiation, if the person opposite the table can see Miranda totally disagrees with this, or she thinks I'm talking rubbish, or my face moves on its own, so I can sit there and be like, you know, I've had to learn how to control my face. It sounds like a small thing, but it's another power skill. Try to come across or manage yourself. Be aware that you have the cartoon face, and then manage the cartoon face so that people don't have the upper hand over you. Real talk, this is honestly what I'm working on. And then I also seek feedback on it. So I vulnerably shared with my team, I know that my face is like a cartoon, so I would really appreciate if you see me in any meeting and my face goes off, like afterwards come and tell me, because I'm trying to learn how not to do it. And I say it to my fellow board directors as well, because I really want to change it about myself. So that would be one example. You really have to know yourself. And if you don't know yourself, you need to ask the people that know you best to tell you who you are. If you think of the Johari window, your public self, your private self, what others don't know about you, but you know about yourself. But there's one box called the blind spot, and it's our responsibility to fill it by asking for feedback very honestly and not being offended by what we hear as well. So I think that's one on the self-awareness, self-management. On the social awareness, I think it's a muscle yet again that needs to be built. We also have introverts and extroverts. For some, just being in a social setting takes a lot of energy out of them and a lot of recovery time. So then you have to be quite intentional. I can hear all the introverts giggling. You have to be quite intentional about understanding what protocols are and how to have the right interactions. And if somebody has delivered a baby, to go out of your way and do the right thing and congratulate them. And if someone has lost someone, to say sorry. All these things are very important human interactions and protocols. They're what make us human, the genuine care. So I think those are some examples, and they're small examples. I think on the social interaction side, I would share building trust and credibility is also important. You can do that through successful delivery of projects. I'm thinking through work and how you come across in a meeting with a client or in the boardroom. And you can do that through good preparation and going in with confidence. But I think knowing that people can trust you is a great foundation for good social interactions and genuine interest. So not being fake, being authentically yourself. I came in here, I was very uncomfortable. I told you I'm uncomfortable. I'm even shaking a little bit. I think those on the front row can see. I told my moderator, so she's gentle with me. And those are human parts. It is just, I think if you try to go to the core of who you are and strip off the mask that we sometimes carry, you can be optimal. The optimal actually comes from the authentic you as opposed to the you that you're pretending to be. So if we all are really honest and wake up in the morning and say, Achanana, this mask, let me just be Miranda. You like her, you don't, it doesn't matter, but I'll always be respectful. And we carry on with our lives. Yeah, so I think that's how I would say those 4 quadrants could play up. Some examples. Yeah.
Because when I read the book as well, I saw it in the 4. It's like the more aware you are of the self-awareness box, then you're better able to self-manage, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Like those two also
correlate.
And then when you're more aware of your social, the community level, your work, your family, the organization level, so that box of social awareness, then that also helps lead how you socially interact.
Yeah.
So I think like those boxes really, I can say like they spelled out the book quite well in terms of and then linking how the self-awareness and the self-management with emotional intelligence, of course, but then also with optimal, right?
Yes.
That's the way in which you then that you carve yourself out in a way that leads to your optimal self as an individual, as a leader, and then how that translates into the organization.
Something I'm thinking about as you're speaking is that I think it's really critical to master the self part first. So the top part of the box, the self-awareness and the self-management will make the other 2 smoother, the social interactions. So if you're very aware of self, I can give some examples. Maybe somebody who's not self-aware and not able to self-manage might have outbursts in the office and they might not know why, or maybe they do know why, but they can't manage it. So they're aware, I'm very angry, this person has really offended me, but they have outbursts, or vice versa. They might not know their emotional state, but are very controlled. High self-management, low self-awareness. So I think it's also important to start with the self-awareness box, I would say, and the others can follow, because if you're self-aware, you'll be better in a social setting. Otherwise, you might be awkward and you might offend and step on toes and not be aware of how you're coming across to other people.
Right.
So I think, optimal starts with self.
Yeah, so again, I think that box in the book really, it makes it easy for you to be able to just remember really the 4 quadrants. I think I'll also encourage you to just like have a mental picture of that. So Miranda, you work with various boards and executive committees. Have you been able to apply the optimal approach in terms of like this sustained level of excellence grounded in emotional intelligence to the various organizations? Can you give us some examples of those of you that you can share in such a setting?
So I do serve on different boards, and maybe I can use the most, I would say probably high profile boards that comes with the most pressure would be the one at the bank. How have I employed optimal? I think in my role there was the intentionality of going in on the first day from the induction all the way to year 5, where I am now. So I'm in the middle of a second term. Preparation, like I really prepared myself. I read 2 years of board minutes from before I was in that room to understand the dynamics and see how decisions are being made, research. I never go to a board meeting without reading the packs. And I can tell you some of my colleagues do not read the packs. It's visible. So I prepare, I write notes, I write my questions. But I've also had to grow in it. The confidence piece. If I ask this question, will it be a stupid question? Maybe I'll ask it and I might not get the respect required. I've learned to silence that voice. Actually, the role of an independent non-executive director is to ask questions of management to try to challenge and get the best possible results. And sometimes you find something when you're challenging. So that intentionality. And then also the relationship I have, the dynamic. There's the management, but my fellow directors. I'm close to all of them or respectful with all of them, but at arm's length. And I've made that decision on purpose not to be too close to anybody so that there can never be any perceived alliance. So I've taken that word independent very seriously, that I'm friendly, I'm respectful to all of them, but they're not my friends. They're my fellow directors. And I think that's very important as well. Reading what your mandate is. They're wonderful people. I could be close with all of them, but it would, I think, be a risk to the work that I've been put there to do by the shareholders. My job is to be there, be independent, ask tough questions, and still get along with everyone. So I think that has been one part. And then over time, reading the dynamics of the room, what is not said. There's a lot that's not said. There's a lot that's said outside the boardroom before the meeting takes place. And so I think you have to have a very high emotional intelligence to know what's going on around you. And when to be quiet as well. That you don't have to be the loudest voice in the room. And sometimes what you're thinking might be said by Namwaka, and that is good enough. Yeah. So you don't have to be the person that says it. You have to be part of the movement to push the organization forward. And if somebody else suggested it and you thought it, that's okay, you support. So I think that has also been part of the self-awareness and self-management, and the cartoon face, which I think I've improved. Yeah.
And so have you had an example or are there examples where you have had to use what the book is telling us in terms of the optimal
Yes.
to guide
Yes.
or to question the board?
Yeah.
Can you maybe give us an example?
Thinking of an example. Maybe an example around recruitment, when we're in the boardroom and we're doing recruitment of executive members or fellow board members for that matter. I think when we're looking at emotional intelligence in that situation, sometimes you can find, how do I put it? When you go through the evaluation process of candidates and a result comes out that's qualitative, and then you have to have a discussion after to see if the data matches what is the right fit for the bank. That could be a good example, because you have to have a very careful conversation there and really understand the nuances and be able to influence and be able to really empathize with the other side as well, other points of view. So I think that would be one example I would give. Maybe another would be, there was a time when we shifted a supplier for health insurance, and the employees were not happy with the new one. But from a cost perspective, it made sense to stay. How do we then tap into that human element of optimal and think about the emotional intelligence of the staff and that they work so hard for the bank and so they deserve the best? And how do we also influence that decision as well? So there's social interaction in that conversation. Yeah.
And so as we get to the ending of the book, when it's talking about the future of EI, it's talking about how organizations can build an EI culture, the emotional intelligence culture. It talks about the importance of EI training, emotional intelligence training. It talks about the importance of EI coaching. And I think in the first question, it said, how do you then maybe work with your senior management in that? So those three things are really highlighted in the book. So my question is this essential for attaining optimal? Like if we focus on building this emotional intelligence culture around us, both in the individual level, but especially here looking at the organization level, looking to provide some EI trainings and some EI coaching. Is this what is needed for organizations and individuals to be at that optimal level? And also, is this what is needed for future leaders? Perhaps, especially here, we can tap into the work that you do with the youth.
Yeah. I would say yes, absolutely. It's a necessity, as we'd said before, from soft skills to power skills. It has to be intrinsic. It has to be part of your culture. It's not something you can pretend. As I said before, it comes from authentic self. So it's about being intentional about creating those moments or those aspects of your culture that are going to drive the optimal state. I gave some examples earlier. Coaching, critically important, how you're building your managers, how they are also coaching the staff that are reporting to them as well. In training with clients, we always embed EQ as a module in any program of leadership development because we believe it's so important. So that is something that is standard, and trying to impact as many people with embracing the idea of EQ, because some are not fully understanding the importance of it and how all leaders need to employ this. On the youth side, when we talk about Gen M, the entire program is based on 21st century skills. A lot of the skills there, emotional intelligence is one of the modules, but how to be innovative, how to make decisions, how to solve problems, all of those things are part of EQ. And I'm probably going to be very unpopular for saying this, but actually it almost doesn't matter what degree you've graduated with, because the cohort comes from multiple different disciplines, but they all have 21st century skills. So they really are top talent, setting up businesses, going into corporates. We've done it for 5 years now. It's a year-long program for finalist students in UDOM, University of Dar es Salaam, St. Augustine, and Arthi. This is the 5th cohort. And I think this is how you really build leadership. It is those skills, the emotional intelligence that's going to make them have that optimal performance, sustained when they enter their new job. They're able to sustain from the day they get in, they don't dip. Or if they set up a business, that they're resilient enough not to give up. So it's critical from the highest levels of power, from Mama herself, all the way down to the rest of us. We all have a duty, I think, and a collective responsibility to harness emotional intelligence, and it's our own responsibility.
And so I would envision or imagine that there may be a challenge, because yes, you now work with a younger generation, which it's a different generation.
Yes, it is.
They question, they think differently. Then there's us kind of in the middle, and then we have slightly older. And you work with all.
Oh, yeah.
Is this optimal? Like, what is needed to be operating that optimal state? Does it face resistance in the older generation, and how have you managed to deal with that in terms of now the optimal state of mind as opposed to flow?
Yes. I think that I never really thought about the fact that I kind of have access to all generations. You're right. And I just thinking on my feet here, I think the emotional intelligence has helped to build connection or to bridge the generational gap. If you have a strong EQ, you can understand the impatient Gen Z, impatient in a good way. And you can understand our parents' generation, and you can understand and decipher and connect with all the goodness of the different generations, as opposed to sit in a place of judgment of each and what they're not. So I think that is something that's critical. I was also thinking about a time when I've really had to, I would say, had to operate at optimal that was the most challenging. And it was the COVID example. And I just wanted to touch on that briefly, if I may. Our business is in consulting. So during COVID, we had two sides of the business at that time. So 2020, there was the kind of advisory side and there was the talent side. The advisory side just dropped to zero revenue-wise. No one was holding events. No one was having training. Clients suddenly stopped payments. We were sustained by the talent or recruitment side of the business. But it got to a point where I had to be very open and vulnerable with the full team and share with them, we have 6 months of reserves, cash in the bank, and we need to figure out what we're going to do. To be open with the staff, to absorb the fear of everyone that was in the team, and also exude hope at the same time, and make them see that we're going to make it through, even though as a leader, I had no idea how we were making it through, but I knew we would make it through together. And negotiating with each person and sitting to understand what is every person's vulnerability, who has 1 month of rent left and then they'll be out. No one should be hungry, no one should be homeless, no one should be jobless. And this is where I think the emotional intelligence came in. And it was a reflection a year later where the team said, you didn't let anyone go. You were open about what the situation was. And you were able to understand unique issues. There were certain staff members who were more vulnerable than others. So how do we give them more help? I think that for me comes from always trying to treat people the way you wish to be treated. And that's what emotional intelligence is. Understanding other people and saying, if I was in their shoes, what would I feel? And therefore, what would I want from you? And so let me give it to you. And I think that that would be kind of the ultimate time, I would say, that really had to live through, optimal at a time when it just was not clear.
And so is optimal then, based on the book, how to sustain personal and organizational excellence every day, is optimal the magic pill? Like, is this, if we do what the book says in terms of focusing on the emotional intelligence part, on the empathy, on the 4 boxes, on the building trust, on the community and relationships, because it also talks about building, the importance of building and sustaining and maintaining relationships in both your personal life and also in the organization. Is this the magic pill? Can this fix a lot of the leadership challenges, for example, that we have here, whether we're talking about specifically Tanzania or broader in the region, Africa?
It's a supplement, not a magic pill. If there was any magic pill, I think Daniel would be a lot richer than he is as well. But it's certainly going to accelerate somebody's growth, someone's career, someone's personal relationships. It's going to help you, I think, access rooms and spaces that you might be locked out of, I think, to really understand and navigate your way. But it's not a magic pill, no. But it will, I think it will be a huge contributing factor. Yeah.
So with that, I would like to open it up to some questions, thoughts, reflections from the floor before asking Miranda to give us her final reflections. Questions, thoughts, reflections? Yes, Karibu.
Yeah, I have not read the book.
You must.
And I'm not sure whether I understood what I thought. But there are questions for an individual, for a company, for an organization. They themselves have their target. They have their target. And normally they put a measurable target.
Yeah.
One thing. It is possible that in emotional intelligence, we may change the target, but how much they agree, because ultimately everyone has to survive financially.
Sure.
You see? So whatever positive change you try to bring should also be accommodated in the financial setup. And that is where when, like we work in many different organizations, we have all those 4 windows. we try to make sure that all the four windows are respected. But we also have to make sure that there are financial targets which are,
Right.
and it's not only financial targets, there are laws and regulations under which the company runs.
For sure.
So that is where I say that when we are looking into all those four windows, do we have anything measurable on it?
Mm.
And is the end product also measurable or not?
Mm.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that almost
Yeah,
mirrors the question I was
yes,
asking about the balance
yes.
between like optimal, say,
Yeah.
sustained,
Yes.
vis-a-vis flow, vis-a-vis KPIs,
Yes.
right? Maybe we'll take another couple of questions before.
Let me just.
Okay, I have a question regarding it's usually there's some workplaces that have people from diverse backgrounds, maybe manager from a certain race. It's normal it's normal here in Tanzania. You find that there are some people when they become managers from maybe from a certain tribe or certain race, you find that the employees are not usually comfortable, maybe because of some kind of traits that those particular people have.
Mm.
So how do you advise the employees, how can they behave in that situation, in order to have optimal performance?
It's an interesting question.
Mallory, Cary.
Thank you. I haven't read the book. I just received a copy of the book this morning. Actually, today, right? Yeah. So my question is this.
Yeah.
All right. My name is Azizi Ponari Mlima.
Yeah.
I'm a member of this resource center. My question is on the question of emotional intelligence and the interface with the artificial intelligence.
AI.
Yeah, because now we talk about the flows, we talk about the peak, right?
Mhm.
Right.
But nowadays where we are moving, I mean, in the future or in other places around the world,
Mhm.
you have robots,
Mhm.
which are using artificial intelligence. How do you connect the two
Mm.
in that where we are heading in the near future? I'm sure things like that are going to happen also in this part of the world. How is the emotional intelligence going to the interface between
Mhm.
emotional intelligence
Okay.
and artificial intelligence?
Mhm.
Because you are now not dealing with the human,
Yeah.
but you're dealing with the machines with
Mm.
artificial intelligence.
Mhm.
How is emotional intelligence going to play a role
Mhm.
managing, robots which are serving the restaurant?
Mhm.
Because you can go and meet a waiter or somebody else there, you put your order, you give a tip and things like that.
Mhm.
That's a connection between you and the waiter. But when a robot comes, offer you a good service or a bad service, and you're pissed off, but you as a human being,
Mhm.
you can control your emotions, not to be angry.
Yeah.
But how are you going to connect with that robot? So my question is the connection between emotional intelligence and artificial intelligence.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Balozi.
Yes, Cary will, and then we'll take, and then
Maria
we'll have
Patrick,
another round.
I'm a lawyer and also a member of Hekima Book Club. Thank you for a very lovely review. I'm really interested to understand, you mentioned you have a Generation M cohort. It's currently the 5th cohort. I'm really curious if you have the same for other people who are not students, because I believe you have a great demographic to benefit from this. Not only students, but even people in the workforce already. There's so many people who do not have the skills, but they're really intelligent. And having experienced myself, I've worked throughout like internship to where I am right now. I can tell you, we left some offices because of just some bad bosses, but they're really smart, but we
Yeah.
just couldn't stay. So if you could share if you have such trainings.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Maybe if you can
Yeah,
take
should
that
I-
that round and then
Before
I'll.
the memory
pass to-
shuts down. Sir, let me start with you on the KPIs. And as businesses, you rightly said, we have financial metrics. Often businesses, well, I'll share our scorecard. We look at financial, customer, community, and staff metrics. So we try to balance our corporate scorecards. I think that my argument would be that emotional intelligence will actually allow you to have a higher financial target. Because if you're unlocking the full potential of all of your team members and really understanding how to motivate them, what drives them, what their key strengths are so they can deliver for the customer faster, better, you actually will achieve more. That's my experience. But I know that there is a lot of skepticism around, well, if I focus too much on my people, what's going to happen to my customers? And will I be able to hit those financial targets? In my experience, it has helped us to overachieve by doing the former. So I would encourage you to consider it, but also not to lose sight, of course, to have a more balanced scorecard, corporate scorecard, that looks at financial, but also looks at staff metrics and looks at customer and community metrics as well. And I think when you have that triple bottom line of people, planet, and profit, it's a triple threat, triple bottom line, and it can help you to be more sustainable as a business. At least that's our experience. I hope I answered your question. Let me come to the second one about tribal differences in the workplace. And what if people are not fully comfortable, if it's not psychologically safe or conducive environment? When we sign a contract and we join an organization, we are confirming that we are going to live and breathe the values of that organization, and we are going to be an active part of that organization's culture. And so when you have factors like tribalism as an undercurrent, it's actually working against the organizational culture that's there. That being said, it is a reality in many places. So we can't deny that it's there, but it isn't what should be. We shouldn't have bias when we're hiring. We shouldn't have bias during our promotions, performance reviews, but I've heard these stories from many people in the workplace. So I think it's important to call it out respectfully, and to use the organization's values. They're not just words on a website. They're behaviors that are expected from all employees, and to use that as your kind of shield. If one of your values is respect and you see a certain tribe member is not being respected, how can you use that value to defend yourself or to advocate for someone else? But I would use the organizational culture as culture number one. Anything else comes secondary to that. I hope you'll work it out, whatever you're going through. Balozi, you almost killed me with this question. The nexus of EI, AI. For me, EI is almost the savior in this movement, the AI development. We need both, but AI will never replace emotional intelligence because that's inherently human. And so we can teach machines all we know, but they will still never be human. And to the great example you've given of the robot waiter, where currently we're served by a human being, and if we're happy with the service, we'll tip, and if we're not, we'll tell them, and maybe they'll get better next time. With a robot, it won't be a connection, it will be just a transaction. You won't be able to connect with that robot. I don't know if it's fortunate or unfortunate, I haven't been somewhere I've been served by a robot yet, but I'm sure it will happen. Did you enjoy? Yeah? No, it's a transaction, right? Maybe a little bit scary. In fact, when we're at the teller in the bank or we're being served a drink, that little moment of connection that you're having with someone, you're buying something at the traffic lights, those are human interactions that robots can never take away. So I believe also the most successful businesses in the future will be able to harness both. You won't be able to have just an AI-driven business. You have to keep the heart and the human element there. But we need to watch this space because that's where we're going, and we need to make sure that we're very intentional about, being optimal, and particularly around emotional intelligence and maintaining that. And finally, my learned friend here, You talked about GENEM. GENEM is a student program, I said is for finalists, but yes, we do have a great program that could be good for you. We recently launched the Visionary Leaders Program. It's an executive leadership program that is hosted by the University of Dar es Salaam. It is open to leaders who are managing a team of at least 3 people. So they have to have people that they're managing. And it's going to build on 6 different capabilities. It will be led by different faculty leaders, both from the university and from industry. So it's a combination, and it's open to people from both public and private sector. And so I'm happy to share information with you after if you'd like to apply. The first cohort is starting in a few weeks, and we would love to have you. So karibu sana. Yeah. Thank you.
I think, yes. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we'll take another round and we'll see how we're doing for time. Karibu.
Asante. My name is Khadija Sinda, a public health analyst and a member to the Resource Center. So in the book, Goleman speaks about finding sweet spots. And then actually when I was reading the book, it really triggered, rather it struck in my mind, and I was like, finding sweet spots. We usually tend to take people for granted the minute we know their sweet spots. Like rather people take us for granted when they know our sweet spot, like it's a weakness, right? So when people get to know them, they usually tend to take it for granted. Now, how do you maneuver around it? Because when you're too empathetic, people tend to take it as a weakness. Now, yeah, my concern was like, in my perspective, I'm so empathy. So like most of the time I tend to feel like people are taking me for granted. Like that's a weakness that everyone knows. Like when I go to her, most definitely she will show up. Most definitely she will help. Then at the end of the day, you're being taken for granted.
Thank you.
So there's a gentleman behind her. Yes. And then
Thank you. Yes. Oh, all right. Thank you. It's a question, actually.
Sorry, your name first?
My name is Frank Christian. I work with IST. I also run Tusome Education Consulting. So my question is, these values that we just discussed from the book Optimal, how can we integrate them into the system? What structures can we create, or can we put in our organizations so that they can run? For instance, when we were speaking, it's more driven by people like you as an as an organizational leader. So what if you're not there? What systems can you put into place that can help to sustain it? And especially taking the context of our organizations right here in Tanzania and Africa. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I think just before going to the next question, that speaks directly to, we have a question online from Angela Nyotti, who I know comes from the banking sector.
Yes.
So how can organizations hone and apply Daniel's principles, like the principles in Optimal? So what are the key starting points? Like, so you're saying like how, if organizations aren't yet there, what are some of the key starting points for leadership and daily operations? So if organizations really want to be able to live and breathe this, the Optimal principles quoted and cited in this book, how do they start? Like, where do they begin? And I think that really speaks and marries well with what our gentleman just said. So, sorry, then the next question.
My name is Oscar Koshuma, and I am the Managing Director of Koshuma's Training Institute. Thank you, Miranda, for the presentation. And as I heard that when you work with your employees or your team, you set this monthly one-on-one. And sometimes when I just heard that if you have a big team, I'm kind of imagining how are you going to set up monthly with them? And is it just with your subordinate or for everyone? Like even the office cleaner, do you also try also to understand their emotions? And but another thing is, if I am working with my team remotely, if you are managing the team that maybe not in one office, they are working away from you. How are you understanding their emotions? Which activities do you do? Like we had COVID recently. Maybe when people are working remotely, how are you engaging them and making them to have that sense of belonging to make sure that they reach to their optimum? Thank you.
Thank you.
I think that's really good and important question, because we're seeing changes in the way people, the way organizations are being organized, right? And I think this is also mentioned in the book, that it's not necessarily everybody in the office at all times. So how then do you still maintain the optimal state of mind and the principles when you have different type of working arrangements, like working from home, remote working, part-time work, etc. I think I saw, was there another question from this side? Yes, the lady at the back. And then there's the lady.
My name is alumni. Code for Women Leadership Program. So being here, it was priceless. Thank you, Miranda, for the review. I like the way you have highlighted how practically emotional intelligence can be integrated into organization culture. That was my question. I was around the book. I was like, I want to hear practical examples on how organization can do that, instead of what is happening probably in most of the places where people feel like it's an individual business. You have to sharpen your emotional intelligence so that when you go to the office, you can deal with the conflicts. Whereas when emotional intelligence is integrated into the culture, probably there are no those conflicts to go every morning to fight with anyway. So thank you so much for that. But you being an expert in recruitment, to what extent do you see organizations are willing to accommodate optimal? Because when you see a job description out there, the recruiters want to see, okay, we have hired you to do this job 100%. I'm also a leader, and I've led teams in a while, and I've come to find my way to cope by saying, you know, instead of pushing someone to be 100 and break them, I would rather understand them so that they can give me 80%. I'll figure out how to deal with the 20. But Miranda, to what extent are recruiters willing to do that when as they hire you to do 100 and yet you can only do 80% with optimal? Then that will help us. But I'll add another one. Sorry for taking your time. I'm glad you are starting dealing with the college finals, but as a mother, I'm concerned. If you can share your experience at schools, you know, like where our teens are and the bullying is like almost a norm. What is there for them? As parents, probably you are trying at home, teaching your children, you know, you have to learn to deal with this when someone do to, but then how do we then try to do something at school to save this future generation? Thank you.
Thank you. Can you take those?
Yes.
They're quite heavy.
Yes, yes.
But good, great
I note
question.
sustained. Thank you for your questions. I really appreciate it. Let me start with Hadija over there. Hi. You talked about sweet spots, and when people know your sweet spots, how do you make sure that they don't take advantage of them? I will turn it back onto myself. I'm firm, but I'm fair. You can have sweet spots and you can understand human beings, but it doesn't mean that you're somebody to be played with. You can have boundaries, and then people can learn how to treat you around those boundaries, but you can still be kind even though you have those boundaries. So I think with age, and we talked about age earlier, we learn over time how to put the right boundaries in place. The right height of the wall shouldn't be so high that nobody can get in, but it should be there. It shouldn't be a completely open gate that anyone can access you. So I think that is how I've learned how to guard my sweet spots. But if we start to hold them back and not tap into them, we're losing a part of ourselves and not able to realize that optimal state. So it's important to know them, to be able to share them, but also have boundaries so they're not taken for granted or no one can take advantage of them. So boundaries would be my response to that. Frank, your question about systems. when it comes to organizational culture, it starts from the very top. So it starts from the board, the senior management. And if you don't have buy-in at that level, it's very hard to influence at a lower level. So my first question would be, and don't answer it here, what is your leadership's perspective on, you know, instilling a more human culture, more connection-based culture in order to reach optimal, so that the organization, you said you're with IST, is it? The school. Okay, I'm an alumni, by the way. So that the school can operate in a better way. Some of the things that I would recommend that have worked for us, but you have to have the buy-in from the top. Often culture transformation programs start at the board and then they trickle down and are cascaded. We do a lot of those programs for organizations. To build this optimum style of culture in your organization, first of all, I talked about values. I know that values sound intangible, but they are very tangible if you spell out what you expect from people, what they are and what they are not, and you hold people to account for those behaviors. I shared that it became part of our recruitment process to hire people who are a culture fit. So people are not entering the door unless they're a culture fit, and then they go for the technical interview after. That's one way to really build your culture. I talked earlier about performance as well. So looking at the KPIs that are more metrics-based alongside the values. So someone knows I need to hit my KPIs, but I also need to be a good person as well in this workplace. One of the things that has worked for us in the last year, we've been doing a weekly staff-nominated, we call it Empowerneer. Has no money to it. It's just figurative. But every Monday in our team meeting, we start the day with a nomination of somebody who really did something outstanding that was attached to one of the values. And you have to mention what exactly it is. And then there's a live vote, and the person has a trophy on their desk for that week. What does it cost? Nothing. But what result am I seeing in my team? It's like 100% better. They are excited. They are competing to win it. They are competing to be at optimal state. What does that mean for me as a leader? My business is growing, and they are growing as well. So there are little things you can do that don't have a monetary value, but can really drive certain behaviors and build the culture that you need. So yeah, your recruitment systems, performance systems, and how you're choosing to lead around your culture. If you're in an environment where your board and your senior leadership is not subscribing to this, you'll have to create a subculture in your team, in your unit, wherever you're working. Did you say you're from IT? IST. Okay. Okay. So then you have the opportunity, if it's your own consulting firm, to build the culture you want. But if you're part of a bigger beast, like a large school like IST, whoever your colleagues are in that unit where you're sitting, you can build a culture that is driving optimal behaviors and emotional intelligence. But also to push up as well, if you notice things that are outside of the culture, to share that upwards. Wishing you all the best. Oscar, you talked about two things, the one-to-ones. I only do one-to-ones with my direct reportees, and I'm not in the office all the time. So I've kind of transitioned my role. I am the managing partner, but I'm in leadership transition. I'm transitioning out of Empower to set up a board, to be more strategically involved, because I believe that you have to step to the side at some point so the next leader can take it to the next level. I've served for 16 years now. But I believe now, as a board member, where I'm going to actually be allocating my time is to build talent in the people that are in the organization. And I think any good leader should be trying to do that with the majority of their time, delivering performance through others. So actually the investment of sitting with my managers helps them to be better coaches and leaders to their team, because as you rightly said, I cannot sit with everyone. Yeah, so that's one. And then remote teams, check-ins, huddles. We do daily huddles. If they're out of the country, online. I've got a team in Kenya right now. I have a team in Ethiopia right now. We do daily check-ins. I let the team run those huddles daily, but the weekly town hall is run by a partner. Making sure you have the right technology and tools. We use MS Teams. Yes, it's expensive, but at least we can collaborate well, and SharePoint and share documents, and everything is live. So good storage of documents to facilitate. And then, yeah, those monthly check-ins are also critical, and being deliverable focused. So it doesn't matter where someone is. They could be at home, but they know what their deliverable is, and they need to make sure it's done. They hit their KPI. I hope I answered your question there, Oscar. Conchesta, you asked also about how to embed optimal into the culture. I've mentioned some examples when we were talking to Frank a moment ago. So maybe I will focus on the second question, which is about what do you do? I think you said if an organization is not really embracing optimal culture, if I understood you correctly. And my answer to that is that it's a two-way process. Sometimes we're sitting expecting to be fed something, but actually it's our responsibility to take something up. So it's a two-way thing. And I think around schools and our children as well, it's something I'm struggling with. I have two teenagers as well. I have a 16-year-old and a 13-year-old. I'll use an example of my son. He struggles academically, but he has a very strong EQ. And actually, I'm finding I'm more proud of that than I am sad to see certain grades that are coming out. And maybe that sounds like a privilege as well. I don't know. But when I see that you can have a kind child in this day and age, it's quite rare.
Right.
So let us not forget as parents to teach our children to be compassionate. They have so much privilege. The fact that we're sitting in this room now with the AC on and the lights on, we're in the 1%, all of us here. So how are we raising our children? They're going to be very entitled if we're not aware of the EQ side. So parents, please don't only push on the IQ and the grades. Please consider the EQ of your children. It's really important. My son will come home. He's not a bully, but he has been bullied. And he's an advocate. He will always raise things about other children. Like, today I saw this and the teacher said this to this guy and it was really not right. And I told the teacher, you know, you shouldn't treat people like that. I'm like, I have another problem on my hands. But inside I'm proud. I'm like, he can see things and he's confident to call them out. His grade's good, not great, but he's kind. I think he'll get somewhere. He'll be okay. Yeah.
Right. And so before we go, I'll take three, the final comments here, this side. I'll just like to also read out the questions from online. We have one that says, especially I think about the program we have with the youth. When working with Gen Z in today's workforce, how can leaders balance the need for resilience while acknowledging the fragility of emerging talent? Because again, here, they're still quite young, right? So some of these things come with age. So how do you balance that? What strategies can be employed to foster a culture of adaptability, emotional intelligence, and sustained performance without overwhelming young professionals? Because it could almost flip. We could go to the other side where now we're putting all of these other pressures on the youth, which may also not be attainable. They may still end up in the flow, wanting to hit that flow as opposed to the sustaining the optimal. And I think such the hats that you're talking about.
Dr. Bono's thinking hats.
Using the red hats, which is emotions and intuition. How do young professionals feel about resilience versus burnout? So I think these are some of the things that you, especially the youth in the room, can think about. Black hat, which is risk and caution. What are the risks of pushing too hard or being too lenient? Again, the balance. Yes, you must do it. API grades vis-a-vis the softer. This is a good person. My child is just inherently good. The yellow hat, optimism, is optimism and opportunities. What strength does Gen Z bring that enhance resilience? So what does the youth have that can really push us to be more resilient as a people, as a culture, as organizations, as a nation? I think. Big picture. Green hat, creativity and solutions, innovation here. What innovative strategies can organizations use to cultivate adaptability? So again, how do you work with teams that are in your organizations? Then the blue hat, process and structure. How can leaders integrate resilience building into work culture systematically? And I think that also speaks to some of the issues of like, how do you not integrate optimal and emotional intelligence into the systems and structures that are already in place. So I think that's a great question. It is. But again, mindful of time, we are of course in the holy month of Ramadan, so to respect our brothers and sisters who will be breaking fast soon, we would like to end in the next, I think 5 to 10 minutes. Yes. But I think there were some 3-4 questions on this side that I'd like to at least give people the opportunity. We have a lot of questions today. So Miranda,
Oh, wow.
I think
It's not like usually like this.
This says something about, this says something
I'll
about.
have to come back.
You
Have
do
to
have
read
to
another
come back,
book.
yes. This
Yes,
is a lot.
it's just for 1 minute. Thank you so much for your review.
And if you can stand up and your name, please. Thank you.
My name is Imtonga Amani. I'm from a small business called the CAPEV Consulting Limited. We do capacity building on policy analysis and research and monitoring and evaluation. Thank you so much, Miranda, for your review and for you sharing your experience. I must confess I haven't read the book, but there's one thing catches me, and I'm a board chair of this consulting firm. So your experience on the boardrooms catch my attention mostly when you say that there's so much said outside of the room, and therefore you use your self-awareness and self-management to react and to the way you say things in the and comment on things in the rooms. I wanted to know if is this the real world experience, and is this how the boards must perform or work? And what is your recommendation for a board chair who run this board, for example? I'm interested on how boards work, and I like this book, and I'm going to become a member of the resource center. Thank you so much. And in your Empower, do you have anything for the board members, for the board of directors? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. I think there was one. Yes, Cary.
Hey, my name is Dean. I'm a member of the Resource Center. My first question is, my worry is emotional intelligence in the workplace is becoming more of a buzzword. You know, every other institution you go in, they tell you the same thing. They tell you, it is all about emotional intelligence. But again, when you look at the workings in the place, because when I was reading the book, it places more emphasis on individuals, but then there are also systematic failures within organizations. So now, how do we fix the systematic failures within organizations? Because we don't want to let individuals live at the same time when we are making them failure, they're around us. That's my first question. Number 2, the book talks about empathy fatigue. But again, also places emphasis on self-regulation. To me, this sounds like it's gonna end up being a band-aid. You get what I mean? It will end up being a band-aid to what we are dealing with. So how do we balance? How do we put that balance and make it sustainable? And also, how do we measure the I don't want to use the term return on investment. It bores me a little bit, but how do we measure the practicability or the effectiveness of the trainings that we are providing in the workplaces for emotional intelligence? And lastly, there are very many changes going on in the world. AI is changing the workplace. We had issues. We had a pandemic going on. Does AI prepare people for automation in the workplace or with all these changes? Thank you.
That was 7 questions.
Thank you. My name is Rita from University of Princeton. I'm a lecturer there. Miranda, thank you for your eloquent, thoughtful, humble review. It was really nice.
Thank you.
My question is on, you've expressed on how you're handling your workers and how you are managing to keep time for each.
And I'm interested in where do you draw the line? Because as humans, we have diverse problems. So I understand that you are accommodating, but even though they are not your friends, when you are their friend and they're trusting you, I want to understand at what point you draw the line so that they don't cross some boundaries. At the same time, they don't feel like they over-trusted you with their vulnerability, if you know what I'm saying. That's it. That's just it.
Good question.
Thank you. My name is Ausin Chimbe. I'm assistant lecturer at Tanzania Public Service College. I'm also a candidate, PhD candidate at Mzumbe University.
Congrats.
Where my research, it's all about emotional intelligence. I'm trying to research on how to develop an intervention tailoring to our Tanzanian environment in order to create a emotionally stable workplace ecosystem in Tanzania. So you can see how this conversation is very
it's a piece of your research
to me. And first I want to thank you, madam. I think you are the most brilliant madam I ever see.
Thank you. I'm humbled.
You know, you are a reviewer, yeah, but we have turned her to be as an emotional intelligence scholar.
Wow.
And, and of course, she managed to play the role in a most profound way. Okay. So speaking about the book, this is the very good book in our today's world. Emotional intelligence is a real deal to our success, whether in social, whatever. Okay. But I want to insist something that our reviewer spoke about knowing ourselves. We really need to know ourselves. Self-awareness is everything. That is the starting point. And you have shared a very, very good experience. Sometimes we can think that we know ourselves, but we really don't know ourselves. As the madam said about tattoo face, cartoon face, yeah, of course. You can't imagine that you have that face.
I do,
but
trust me.
through, but through understanding yourself, I think we can make our life better. Thinking about the book also, there was a question about, is that a magic pill or not? I think for me, that is not a magic pill, but the book have tried to introduce a very, very, very good concept about the optimum. Because in the previous years, we had that issue of flow, and that was very rare for many of us to attain that flow. But the book have tried to tell us that there is something very simple, there is something that's very profound. But I can recommend another book from the Professor Mark, director of Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence, Permission to Feel. I think the book of exposed a lot of
Permission to Feel.
Permission to Feel.
Okay.
I think the book of exposed a lot of simple issues, step by step, how to cultivate. There is a Lula framework in that book, steps to manage from understanding our emotions, whatever, up to that. Also, there is another concept called Moderator. Moderator introduced within that book. Moderator is about constantly scanning your mindset and trying to find how am I feel, energy level I have at this moment, and trying to find an emotional vocabulary that can describe your feeling at that moment. And I want to insist something about emotional vocabulary. Speaking about emotions, we can speak surface issues like I'm sad,
Happy.
I'm happy. Those are very simple terms relating to emotional vocabulary. But if you can find a lot of vocabulary, and this is a challenge for our institute, maybe BAKITA, TUKI, Kiswahili, waanze kutafuta maneno yanayoweza ku express emotions zetu, kwa sababu ni ngumu sana. Kuna maneno mengine huwezi kujua kwamba
Kweli.
na feel vipi.
Ni kweli.
Sometimes kuna feeling unayo lakini you
Huwezi
can't
hata
say
kuitamka.
kwamba ni neno gani. So that is the issue. Thank you so much, madam.
Thank you.
And Uongozi Institute. This
Thank
is a
you.
very amazing discussion.
Thank you. Did I?
Yes.
Okay. I'll go very swiftly because I know it's almost sundown. Starting with Godfrey's question online. Actually, if you'll allow me, Madam Moderator, I will take all of those questions and I will commit to writing an article on my opinion. Because I write once a month in the Citizen. So the next one, the one for April, I will write on his topic of Gen Z in the workplace. Because I need some time to digest it. And if it's Godfrey, who I know, that's my auditor. So he's already testing me. Let me come to your question, madam, about your board experience and chairing the board. I also chair the board of the African Women's Entrepreneurship Cooperative. The role of the chair, you are the leader within the board. So the same principles that you might have with your team in your organization, the chair should be doing to groom the talent of the other board directors. So as chair on that particular board, I take that role, leadership, setting example, checking in with those board directors, making sure they show up, they give their best when we have the meetings. So I spend a lot of time on that as the chair. In terms of the board dynamics, we're human beings. It's just the way it is. There are things that are said formally in the room and there are things that are said informally. It's important for you to be tapped into all areas, but only operate in the formal as well. So be aware of what's happening here. Don't engage, but be aware and then operate here in the formal space, in the boardroom. That's my strategy as well. In terms of training for board members, I can only refer you to Institute of Directors, Tanzania. They have great programs for company secretaries, for board members. You can be certified, and they also help you to find board roles as well. So it's like everything in one. So I would recommend to go there. Uongozi is doing board, huh? How could I forget? So yeah, I'll be in trouble. So as a member of the Resource Center, please get information from George on your way out. Yes. Dean, your 7 questions. Is he still here? Oh, he asked them and left. Okay. Okay. How do we fix the systematic failures? My gosh, if I had the answer, Dean, if I had the answer. We can only operate in our own span of control, right? We control a certain area. We don't control other people, and it's hard to control systems, but we can influence. We have a sphere of influence. So do you choose to sit and complain about the failures, or do you become part of the change? That's the only challenge I could give. And that can be tough and it can make you give up. And sometimes it's too uphill of a battle to make change. But if you can pull other people with you, then change comes. That's not a political statement. That's an organizational one. How do we balance? How do we make sure we don't get empathy fatigue? It's a valid point. My sister, I'll use her as an example, is an empath. But the definition of an empath is you actually absorb all the energy, right? So I see myself as somewhat of an empath. I'm an empathetic person, but I can also have the exchange and still leave and be able to carry on with my day. And I think it comes to boundaries, where she will take a few days to recover from the conversation. So she has to be more careful with how she spends her energy. So yes, it comes back to self-awareness. How deeply do you absorb negative energy? For example, some people are not built for counseling or being psychologists because they absorb people's depression and anxiety and they become depressed. And there are some who are very good at that work and can keep a boundary. We're not all made for the same things. Yeah.
People in high pressure jobs.
Yeah.
When we look at the ratio, let's say, of nurses to patients,
Mm.
when we look at teachers to students,
Yeah.
high pressure jobs.
Yeah.
How do we balance that in their workspace to sustain it? And I think that is why I say that probably maybe it might work as a band-aid for the short term, but when we are looking at the long term, how do we sustain that?
Yeah. I don't have all the answers, but what I would say is in that situation of high pressure, you have a choice to be kind or not. And the pressure can make you a very dark and unkind person. You could become the kind of person that is walking around defending people, snapping at people, not helping them. And if you're like that as a nurse, in my opinion, you're not a nurse, because you're there to nurture and be compassionate. So there are some professions that require you to have EQ, all professions. But if you're a teacher, how can you work with children and have no EQ? Will you be able to teach? Will you be able to understand the kid that has a learning difficulty, or you'll beat them and expect them to learn through the beatings? We have to have that human element. If we're a police officer and we don't have EQ, how will we abuse our power, or a prison officer? So we have to have it, otherwise we lose our humanity. Return on investment, how can we prove that this training or this knowledge is improving? I would say less complaints, less people are complaining. That's probably a good sign, but also seeking feedback. Do you feel like I am more empathetic? Am I able to connect better? What are my areas of development? Constantly trying to fill the blind spot is important. But less complaints would be one way that I'm measuring within my business. If less customers are complaining, then my staff are doing well. I hope I answered most of your questions there. Yes, please add.
One thing I'm learning also from this book, in the other book that I'm reading, that I'm really encouraging members of this resource center to read, is a book called Ego is My Enemy. Ego is the enemy. Ego is the enemy. Ego is the enemy. I'm really encouraging you to read this book. I'm reading this book right now. Here it is. Ego is the enemy. I put in my tablet. Ego is the enemy is the book which talks about how most of us think we are very balanced people. We think we are. Most of us, we think we're very balanced. We think we have all it takes to be emotionally intelligent. And then it says, that's what we think. That's what we believe. We believe that we are all very balanced people. But actually it says everybody here has something in them. It's called an animal in them. That's called ego. That's why a small baby, when you take something away from them, they throw themselves down there and then do everything, because that's an ego. You have that, you cannot take that away from me. Now, it says, ego is an unhealthy belief of our own importance. Unhealthy belief of our own importance. We think we're very important people. That's where it starts. And that's where all the leadership problems start. Because when you get a position, you feel like I'm the most important person. Then it says it's feel better than any reasonable utility. This is really bad. You feel better than any reasonable utility. Now, utility means your value is not what you think you are. And then it says superiority that exceeds the bounds of confidence and talent. Sometimes you don't have the talent that it takes for you to have that ego, but you think just say 1 degree, maybe a master, maybe a PhD, and you think you have everything it takes. It says it's an inflated one's importance to the extent of distorting the reality. Then it talks about someone's dangerously focused on themselves. Someone dangerously focused on what? On themselves. And it's the last you say, it's the voices that tell us we are better than what we really are. Now, all this is the balance of bringing self-awareness, social awareness, self-management, and then you say relationship with awareness. Cannot work if we don't work on our egos. We have to start there. You have to lower down your ego. And now it gives in 2 levels. The first level is when you have it, you have the ego. The second level is when you don't have it at all, and then you don't want to show that you don't. And actually, the most dangerous one, when you think, I don't have it, I don't want to seek help.
Right.
I'm going to lock myself in the house and die hungry, but I'm not going to seek help from a relative. That's the worst part of it. Now, some of us try to be very balanced. I remember last night, I said, I must go to the restaurant, but I have some issues to work on in the room. So quickly I say, it's late at night. Waking up someone to buy me a ticket, it's too late. So I say, let me buy myself a ticket. I'm entitled to the CEO. Just calling someone buy a ticket. And I say, I will stop them. So I go, I buy a SGR ticket myself, quick. And then I go to call the driver, I say, pick me in the morning because I have an SGR ticket. So I go to bed. Early in the morning, I wake up. And then as soon as I wake up, I hear a phone call from my driver. He says, but your ticket says Dar es Salaam to Dodoma, not Dodoma to Dar es Salaam. And I'm like, okay, so I have this entitlement as a CEO. I'm supposed to have someone buy me a ticket. But now I say, I don't want to have ego and have just a ticket, I can buy it myself. So I drop down my entitlement and I do it myself. And then I get disappointed in the morning. So I'm stuck now. I go back, my ego goes down. I go back to the secretary. I say, can you buy me a ticket? They say, right now it's late. Let me check. Then they find another ticket for 1 o'clock. And I say, I have to be in Dar es Salaam today because I have a resource center activity there. I must be with Miranda today. So buy me another ticket quick. Buy me another ticket. I get to the airplane. I find I have the last seat. So I got so disappointed because my list is the last one by the toilet. And then I get here, the first thing I hear, the driver apologizes to me. He says, I'm very sorry, the AC is not working. And I was just coming this way and then I just want it just happened. And so I get another disappointment because now I have to go in the hot car and whatever, and I'm a CEO, and I'm a CEO, and I get waited, nothing. So we have these ups and downs. Sometimes we want to be balanced people by looking at this self-awareness and social awareness, and then we lower ourselves to the point where we get disappointed again. So what we need here is a balance. You have to be a balanced person, but first, all of us work on that ego. Read this book, Ego is the Enemy, and it's a very big difference in your life.
It's a good one. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you, Mr. Singo. It's almost like I know you haven't read this question. From one of the online participants, Simona Said said, being emotionally aware means incorporating the human factor in interactions with others. However, people differ and some struggle with ego issues. So it's almost like you knew, but you didn't know. Since ego can be a barrier to emotional intelligence, how can individuals with strong egos be encouraged to embrace emotional intelligence? I think that's part of what that book also speaks to, but this speaks to people who do have those big egos and are aware of them, not necessarily to the second group. So I think, a very good read. I hope all of you have referenced ego is the enemy. And I think you had one more response.
Yes,
Miranda,
there was one question from Rita.
Yes, Rita.
Who talked about workplace problems, was it? Yeah?
Yeah, it's like how how far, where do you draw the line?
Where do I draw the line? For me, it's important to be respected, not liked. But when in my early days of leadership, I thought being liked was the be all and end all. I wanted to be someone that everyone in my team loved, but now I don't care as much to be loved, but rather just to be respected. So that helped me to put a boundary. In the early days, I would probably spend too much time with my team. Now I'm very intentional. There's a social event, I stay, I have one drink, I excuse myself, even if I have nowhere to go. And I would love to be there, but I excuse myself to give them space and to put a boundary so there's always a bit of distance. And maybe just to go back to the one-on-ones, when I have those one-on-ones with my staff, it's not necessarily to counsel them or to talk about all their personal issues. It's workplace challenges they might be having, how I can unlock certain potential and block the road, open a door for them, almost like a mentorship in a way. But through the process of that, sometimes you will find out personal things. I'll address them, but it won't be the main focus. And I will also call people out and say, this issue you've shared, this needs professional help. Please see the workplace counselor about this, but we're here to talk about this. Because I know I'm not qualified to counsel. So it's important to have that boundary as well. I'm not qualified. Yeah.
Boundaries.
Yes.
I think you said this a couple other comments as well, making sure that where are your walls? How high are they? Not too high that you're not accessible, not too low that everybody in the gate is wide open, that everybody can come in. And so again, finding that. Maybe I'm looking at George, or I'm looking at Miranda.
The non-reader. George?
So we can maybe
a recommended book for having boundaries.
It's actually in leadership. Yes, in leadership. Yes, in leadership.
The tone, the courage to be disliked. Which sets the tone for personal responsibility, separation of tasks.
That's a good one.
The courage to be disliked.
Our book club, the Hikima Book Club. We're also on Instagram, so you can see highlights on that. The Hikima Book Club. We read the book, The Courage to be Disliked. It sets the tone for self-responsibility, separation of tasks. So there are areas in terms of people saying they came from trauma and that's why they cannot do certain things. So it's basically 5 nights elaborated in the book, fiction-wise, but really shares history, and we can understand why people tend to drown in their problems and not be responsible. But the same people who are coming from problems have become great leaders. So you can get advice socially, workplace, a lot of things. I think it's a nice book.
Thank you for that.
It's resonating with ego is in the enemy.
Yeah, yeah.
Where you put a bandage and it becomes like a defensive mechanism. It's also ego. So for any of us who don't think they have ego, and many people used to tell me I'm humble. When I read that book, I knew it.
Yeah.
It's like for everybody.
But it comes back to awareness, right? I would say also to look up the concept of servant leadership. That has also helped. Servant leadership. It's a concept. It's a concept, but do look it up because it will help you similarly, as you've said, to put your ego behind, always lead from the back, push others forward, make others shine. Those things that are embodying, the right EQ. Yeah.
Thank you. And if I may, just a quick question. You mentioned something, just very tiny, I think. Now
It's the moderator.
If I may.
30 seconds. Yes.
You mentioned about you shared a personal story about your son, and I think sometimes the bullies start at home. So I was really impressed when you're sharing that you've considered his kindness, because I think sometimes our own parents are the first bullies. That's why kids are accustomed to experience bullying in school and tolerate it at work.
Yeah.
Because so many of us, as you said, millennials, we're just taking it in.
Yeah.
Maybe it's because of how we were brought up.
Yeah.
You don't have to ask, don't have to question. You just have to go with the flow.
I hear you.
Yeah, that's just what I wanted to highlight.
Thank you for that. I will add something personally after we're off camera on that to share with you. The last thing I wanted to say, it wasn't a question, but our Bacterium Tarajiwa, doing your research, really great research that you're doing. I wanted to share when you talked about emotions and how it's really hard to articulate what your emotions are. I've printed out a giant feelings wheel in the office. Feelings wheel. If you just go on Google and put feelings wheel, it's like a huge, colorful, huh? It's got all the emotions. So when it goes in sad, it's like a slice, but then it's like, what kind of sad? Is it disappointment? Is it shame? Is it depression? And then I've been training my team to use the words at the beginning of every meeting. We do a 1-word check-in. No one's allowed to use good, bad, sad. Like they have to take a word from the wheel. It's on the wall near the printer. So every time you print, you see it, you're learning more vocab. It's also helpful for your relationships. I've given it to my husband so that he can learn to share his feelings as well. Yeah.
So you want to spend a few minutes a day?
We do a 1-word check-in in the weekly meeting. Weekly meeting. 1-word check-in. We go around the room. Someone says, how are you feeling today? I'm this. It takes 1 minute. Bas. Business is happening. I don't want us to leave here and think at Empower, they're sitting around hugging and crying and talking about their feelings. These, just making it clear.
Yeah, and I think that's important to clarify because I think when she asked the question, she's like, doesn't that become like a kumbaya, like everybody's like crying moment?
Yeah. Oh, we work hard. They work hard. It's tough.
So I think I'd like to read the last question, which I have a feeling you could possibly, you may be able to incorporate it into the article that you're going to write. And I think, George, you're going to now follow up on that, right? Because that's directly linked to this book review. So Mr. Renatus asks, how does your team respond to change in any activity, whether financially or working hours, etc.? In organization based on your experience, do they all choose to agree, or some find it still difficult in relation to their emotional intelligence, especially in your experience with the youth who may not have encountered such before or being new to the workplace? So I think it speaks back, I
Yeah.
think Godfrey, when you just saying,
Yeah.
how when you're working with youth, how do
Yeah.
we work towards that?
I'm sure we've all seen the change curve and how when a change comes, we start with shock and then disbelief and denial, and then we start going down the curve, and then we're angry, and then we get depressed. And then there's a choice when you're in that dip, and you choose to either completely disengage or you choose to push yourself up the other side with acceptance and then starting to perform with the new normal. I think being open and talking about the process that human beings have to go to embrace change is important, because some are very resilient and can go through that process in hours or days or minutes, and others never come out of the dip when there's a big change, like being retrenched or moving to a new job, or yeah, those are probably some big workplace changes, or having a new manager that you don't have as strong a relationship with. These are big changes. In my observation, Gen Z are less resilient, more confident. More confident, they know what they want, they're less likely to get all the way in the dip, but when they get there, it's really hard to get them out. That's my experience. They are able to advocate for themselves and say, this isn't right, or I don't want to do that, or I feel burnt out and I need a day off. I would never dare say something like that when I was working. I am still working, but Gen Z can say it live. I'm taking a personal day. Okay, you take a personal day. If you're tired from this task, I don't know what's going to happen when you start the project next week. So I see a lessened resilience, but I think resilience comes over time. When we go through tough experiences, we become tougher as individuals. It's based on experience, and we were all young once. We were all foolish at a certain point. We've all been through things and made mistakes and complained and, had trouble navigating change. But it gets easier the more that you go through change. Yeah.
So yes, so now I'd said this half an hour ago, but now we're officially coming to an end. It's a few minutes to 6. So I would like to invite Miranda to just give us your final thoughts and reflections on the book.
Yeah.
And the conversation that we've had today to help us wrap up for this particular session.
Perfect. Thank you very much, first of all, to the moderator, Namwaka, for leading this conversation. My 3 takeaways would be, number 1, EQ is a requirement. It's not optional. Even if you don't like it, you need to learn to like it and learn how to harness it, because it will make things better in your organization, in your team, in your family, in your relationship. It's really critical. It's like the secret sauce. Number 2, even if you're in an environment where it feels impossible to affect change, always think about your sphere of influence. Are you a promoter or a detractor in that environment? Are you part of the problem or the solution? Are you a positive force and energy, or are you a draining burden? And we have a choice to be either in every situation. And when we feel that we are being that draining burden, to be intentional enough to say, let me not be that person. And finally, I would say that as we move into the future, and maybe it's to Balosi's point about AI, I think EI, or emotional intelligence, needs to go hand in hand. So as we become better with employing AI in our businesses, in our personal life, let's not forget that the human element will never be able to replace whatever machines can do. So we shouldn't fear what's coming. We should embrace what's coming, but we should also embrace our human foundation that's also going to work hand in hand with AI. Yeah. With that, I'll say thank you. And I'm really humbled to be here. I was nervous. I feel more comfortable now. And now that it's done. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. So prior to starting, she whispered, she's like, this is my first book review. And so I'm really nervous, but did not show it. So the cartoon face didn't show in this.
Okay,
in this
it's working. I'm learning.
And it was like, so I think this conversation today was one that could go on for hours, because it really does spill over into so many different aspects of our lives, from the very individual level of the self to the family, to your larger family, to the community, and then to your organizations, to the nation at larger. And then, of course, as it relates to leadership, which you have so eloquently given examples that all of us can now apply it as what one participant said. You've helped give practical examples, and in that the optimal state, which is what this book is telling us to strive for, is actually attainable.
It is.
The flows may come, and when they come, don't not celebrate them. Do celebrate them when you have that amazing performance. You've peaked, you've hit all all the ticks and the boxes. You've all the KPIs. That's great, but let's also look towards more of a sustainability approach where we're looking to be our optimal ourselves. But I'll wrap up by one of your last 3 points when you said like emotional intelligence is basically, it is no longer, it's not an option. It's just something that we simply all have to embrace now, but also going forward. So with that, I think this book, Optimal, really has set the base for us and has made us also examine ourselves, right? In terms of the self-awareness, self-management, those two, and then social awareness, social interaction, those 4 quadrants, which are the base of EI, is something I think all of us can leave here with those 4 quadrants and then add these other resources because they all then contribute to those 4 main quadrants that were spoken about in this book today. So asante sana, and thank you for your patience, but also thank you for the fantastic questions and the discussions. I think today has been one of the most lively and engaging and interactive sessions that we've had here in a very long time. So thank you to all of you, and please keep coming. But again, thank you to Ms. Miranda. So nakushukuru sana. Thank you very much. Asanteni. Have a good evening. George, over to you.
Thank you so much. This has been really a brilliant conversation. I'm going to dilute it. Ms. Miranda talked about, now we're going to be quiet. So for me, it's one of those moments. A couple of comments. First of all, I think a number of books have been recommended to me. Yeah, the first one about the learning. Yeah, so we do have limited copies. I think we just have drawn 2 copies of that. So I'll share soft copy the book. Then hopefully maybe we can get more copies. Then there is the courage to be this slide. Yes, we do have this, but I think it's also only 1 copy. So I'll also share the soft copy. The book we don't have is bonus.
De Bono.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So she'll have to get.
Okay.
So I'm also seeing so many new faces. So I'm really excited. So I would encourage you to join our community. We do have a membership in the resource center. We have some forms outside there. So please would encourage you to join our community. And let's, keep it going. Today we do have some complementaries. There are people who never skip a day coming to this place. And actually, by coincidence, today for some reason. So by some coincidence, today they were the first people to come in today. Some came in by around 3 p.m.
Wow.
Yeah, so we decided to have some complementaries today. The CEO, Ms. Miranda, will assist me in giving out the complementaries. So these are five books. The author is a graduate of our PGD program, postgraduate diploma in leadership. And it's, yeah. So let me call out the first person, Oscar Kashuma. Also, yeah, it's the first one. Yeah, Oscar is a graduate of our online certificate in leadership, by the way. Hongera sana, Oscar. The second person is Kaima. The third person is Salima. Thank you.
Congrats.
The fourth person is Joseph Nkata. So,
Congrats.
thank you. If Joseph doesn't show up to the resource center, you'll have to call him. Are you okay? Is everything fine? You know?
Well, that's it.
Yeah. So it's really, and the last person is Rhoda Charles.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. I know some of you have been fasting, and it's almost time to break the fast. So we have some kind of futari. I wouldn't say, you know, I'm managing expectations.
Yeah.
You know, it's not, you know, a buffet, but you know, something that will get you going on your way. So I'd like to invite you. Even some of you haven't been fasting, you're also invited.
Okay.
Yeah. So Karibuni sana. Let's
Sounds
put it.
good.
Oh, by the way, yes. So we do have another branch in Dodoma Resource Center. Yes, Kambarage Tower, 8th floor, OPSSF. Yeah, so it's just a copycat of this. So in case you're in Dodoma or you go to Dodoma, you need somewhere quiet to reflect and read. Yeah, it's located, you know, 8th floor, Kambarage Tower.
So it's the same membership? if
Yes,
you're a
it's the
member.
membership. If
Okay.
you're a member here, automatically you qualify
Okay.
the other side.
That's
Yeah,
good.
yeah. So please, karibuni sana.
Asante,
So
George.
futari, you know, and let's keep the conversation going. Asante sana.
Organizations and the In Focus series offers in-depth insights into the issues driving development across Africa. To further our work as a center of excellence for leadership training, research, and knowledge exchange, the Institute is committed to working together with our global community of partners. Through our work, we have trained senior and emerging leaders from around the continent, hosted policy dialogue events in Tanzania and beyond, and commissioned research studies on leadership. It is essential to us that our team continues to uphold the Institute's values of professionalism, reliability, integrity, respect, and creativity. Uongozi Institute is based in Tanzania with offices in Dar es Salaam and Dodoma. The impact of our work, however, continues to extend beyond the country's borders to support leaders across the continent and to achieve our vision for a prosperous, equitable, and sustainable Africa.